Hey there, and welcome to the Think Fitness Life podcast. We're fueled by the incredible clients who inspire us every day, allowing us to elevate their health and fitness journeys. On this show, you'll gain valuable insights from top professionals, hear inspiring transformation stories, and discover the knowledge and motivation to create your own best life. Let's dive in. As someone who has continuously used therapy as a way to heal and elevate my personal performance, I know wholeheartedly that you cannot always read the label when you're in the jar. And that's why it's so helpful to have a professional in your corner to talk to. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp to provide our listeners with the opportunity to work with a licensed therapist from the comfort of your own home. Receive 10% off your first month when you sign up by going to betterhelp.com/TFL. That's betterhelp.com/T as in think, F as in fitness, L as in life. And remember, you're not alone. There are people out there who can help.
Welcome back to the Think Fitness Life podcast. Today we're going to dive in biggest mistakes with nutrition. 5 steps that we have for nutrition. You can't run before you walk when it comes to nutrition. But my guest today, we're diving into a nutrition experiment. When he emailed me, I was excited to hear about this. I'll let you kind of introduce yourself. What do you got going on, your background, your history? Welcome to the show.
Absolutely. Thank you much, Eric, for having me on. Yeah, man, the short of it, I'm an immigrant. I came here in 2009 originally from Venezuela to the United States, pursuing the dream to become a sports dietitian. I wanted to work with pro athletes. It didn't really start that way. I wanted to be a doctor. Didn't get into med school. Nutrition was part of the medical school that I wanted to attend to back home in Caracas, where I'm from. And it seemed like a pretty simple kind of step over. They said, just start nutrition, then you can always transfer. I never did. I realized that I had a true passion for understanding how the body works and how to prevent disease rather than treat it. And I studied nutrition, which I think is the way to do that. I went from wanting to do sick care to focusing more on prevent care. And I think being a dietitian is what helped me do that. And I was really into sports. And I wanted to work with people within sports. That's where I realized that there was an entire world called sports nutrition. Dietitians working with professional athletes, and it's actually a very huge industry now that's grown over the past few years. And that's where I came to the United States to do. And, 12 years later, here I am working with mostly now high performers, people that just want to do the best. I call high performance anybody that is actually wanting to improve their health, whether it's weight loss, fat loss, health, or just really taking good care of themselves. Don't work with as many pro athletes as I used to, but it's still a passion of mine. And I am the founder of a company called Planos Nutrition, which is dedicated to helping really bridge the gap between, a lot of misinformation and education and coaching and accountability to be able to get people results. That's a good way to summarize what I do.
Yeah, I always think working with athletes, there's a big disconnect from your regular registered dietitians, and no fault to their own, and then stepping into the sports world, because it's a whole different, not the nutrition advice stays the same, but it's a whole different world for the performance side that I found that a lot of regular dietitians don't go into. How can you leverage certain supplements? How can you do certain things to help your performance and really kind of hack your performance to be even better? Usually it's the kind of the standard, hey, make sure we're getting carbs, fats, and proteins, which I respect that. But there's something else when it comes to training athletes and training them to be good on the nutrition side that I haven't found we have a lot of, but it's great that you're doing it and doing it especially at a high level, because people will hear it and be like, okay, I want to understand my sport better. I need to talk to someone like him, not just your standard dietitian.
Yeah. And there's one statement that somebody said to me, I think another fellow dietitian a long time ago, that really stuck with me. And I think it really changed the way I started to see sports nutrition, which literally, I think she said, sports nutrition is not the same thing as healthy nutrition. And when she said that, I was, what do you mean? Well, think about it. When I work with NFL athletes, when you had to feed an NFL lineman who is 320 pounds at, less at 20% body fat, which is a pretty lean 320-pound person, try to feed that giant with 5,000 to 6,000 calories on a daily basis, eating sweet potatoes, rice,
Oof.
chicken, and broccoli,
Yeah.
because that's what healthy nutrition for a lot of people think about. So good luck with that. I understood that the nutrition of an athlete, it's not the same thing as the nutrition for the person that is not training to perform in a sport or a sporting discipline, particularly at the professional level or even at the competitive level, I guess I should say. They're not the same things. There some principles still apply, but there's a lot more that goes into it for purposes of an athlete. And I think a lot of times people don't necessarily understand that. And that's where there's many, especially in the world of social media now, where things get murky because you have athletes trying to follow things that they shouldn't really be doing for their performance. And at the same time, you have people, average Joes, that, just people, maybe you and I, who just train 1 to 2 hours a day, not necessarily are pro athletes, who just want to kind of fuel our bodies adequately, maybe also doing something that perhaps is not really as needed for us. There's a huge disconnect around that, and that's really what I talk also about in terms of our really nutritional principles for that.
That's the hardest thing, is what you say, eating as an athlete versus the healthy eating, because I try to do as best possible, but you get to a point where you can only eat so much quantity of rice and meat, and the quantity of healthy food that you're eating, it starts to amass. It's crazy. You understand? Oh, there's got to be some different things to do when you're training an athlete versus I'm just going to eat really healthy, because you can just mass them out, eat these foods, sweet potatoes and vegetables. Holy smokes.
Yeah.
But that was where I found in my journey, where once I started eating more, I focused more on protein and more the more calories per what I needed, I could finally put on muscle mass that I was looking to gain. There's a big issue there, where in a good way to teach athletes that, hey, this is how you do it, but then you can't go on social media and try all these crazy things.
Yeah. And when you think about this, I work also with a lot of guys, and the biggest fear around them, or that they have around food and nutrition, is they all want the same thing. They want to look great. But they also want to have a ton of muscle, but they also want to be the leanest they can be, right? Yep. And they want to make sure that the nutrition kind of fits that. And the problem with that is that you have to kind of set specific priorities within all that, because, you have to really understand that, is it possible to do all at once? Sure, but I think a lot of times people, men and women, they want to gain muscle, and they start to really try to do all the things to be able to do it, but then they're too afraid to eat, right? Because they're afraid that they're going to gain fat. And then they're losing body fat, and then this is mostly in guys, and then I look too skinny. I don't want to look too skinny. Okay, what happens is many people stay in this, body composition limbo, as I like to explain it. They spend years gaining and losing the same body fat muscle that they have been doing. They stay stuck because they're not necessarily willing to put themselves through uncomfortable periods of time to go one way and then towards the other. And it doesn't have to be this bulk, the typical gym bro culture, bulking, cutting, all these different things like that. But you have to start to set priorities, and your nutrition and training needs to kind of follow along the sides of that strategy. And many people are not doing all the things. And we talked earlier about people wanting to run before they can walk, which is a lot of these people that when they see stuff on social media, they're trying to do all these perfect things without really kind of covering the basics first. And I think this is where they start to make decisions that are simply unsustainable, or they get results that won't last, or simply they fail at it, which is really what a lot of times, this is why we have, and why we do this podcast, why you have your podcast, why you support people, is because they don't have this stuff figured out. If they did, we wouldn't really be we wouldn't be talking today.
And it's for us as coaches and trainers to kind of figure out, because what you said about being lean and putting muscle, I dealt with that. I was, okay, I want to put as much muscle mass on, but I also want to be lean. And it's very hard to do because you see one going down, one coming up, and you're like, I don't like the way I look. And then it's this conundrum. I can see where especially a lot of guys have that and they are afraid to eat, but then they're looking at crazier methods, let's call it, stuff you see online. They're trying to hit that really fast sprint to try to capture something quick when it takes time, because I'm sure you tell your athletes and clients every time, like, hey, this is a change that needs to last. It's not going to, you do this for 72 hours and all of a sudden you're going to drop 5 pounds. It doesn't work that. But a lot of people, I think they see it, oh, okay, I'm going to do this. And then they don't put enough time into it to see the results.
Yeah. And that's usually what kind of gets people, again, stuck in that place.
And speaking of Run 4 You Walk, I know you mentioned it. Let us know, tell us about your experiment you just came off of. You ran a diet experiment. I want to hear about it. I want to hear the results. I want to hear about your thought process of why you did this. Let's let this rip.
I'm halfway through it, so
okay.
I may have to come back for the second part of it. But one of the I think unique things about the way I approach my coaching is I want to try things that I either teach or talk about, or I want to understand what my clients sometimes, bring me to the table that they want to try, test, or they're curious about. And the same thing I do in my social media. I'm an evidence-based practitioner. Everything I do is based on the science. And I provide a lot of the scientific backing and a lot of the content and stuff that I put out. But I also get a lot of skepticals that go against the big pharma, the big science, all those different things that. I think to a certain extent also to test things myself. Be the guinea pig of the diet that I'm talking about, or be the guinea pig of the diet that I'm recommending to my clients. Well, that's exactly what I decided to set out to do. I've done this a few times in the past. Back in 2016, when intermittent fasting was not even something that was mainstream yet, I was doing intermittent fasting experiments because that was my thesis in my master's degree, to understand how it affected performance. Then later on, I went to talk about working in a facility where I needed to learn how to coach people on ketogenic diets for neurological conditions. And how can I coach somebody on how to do a ketogenic diet if I've never done it myself? I did that, and I poked myself through an entire ketogenic diet experiment for an entire year. So I've done that a few times in the past, but it's been a while since I did it. And I'm sure you've heard about the carnivore diet, right?
Oh, yes.
It's such a big, it's one of the biggest trendy diets being searched out. Wellness influencers are, going crazy with it. Liver King, Carnivore MD, all these people with massive audiences talking about the magic of carnivore diets, the way that we should be eating, and all these different things. I did a video on YouTube about it, and the fact that there's no really scientific consensus on its benefits, and that there's simply no research to back up its efficacy and what it does, more than just, probably put you in a pretty strict, ketogenic state, and that's much of it. So I got a lot of hate on it, of course, as expected in the comments. And somebody said, well, have you ever done it? Because you never done it, you cannot speak for it. And I was challenge accepted. Here's what I did. I haven't done the carnivore part of it yet. I decided to do what I always tell people it happens with a lot of these diets, which is, where are you starting off from? Most people, when they find a diet that seems really great, and you're like, wow, look at all these results that people are getting from it. What do? They jump straight into it. And then when you start to ask them, what were you eating before? Well, they jump into a diet most likely because they're desperate for something. Most people do. They want to lose weight quick. They're just really trying to do something. Whatever they've done, it hasn't really worked. They go from eliminating, most likely, 80% of foods, because it's limited, to now cleaning act and just only having literally something that you can count with your fingers and your hands. You're most likely going to experience a benefit. You cut out a lot of processed foods. You cut out a lot of things that you shouldn't really maybe be eating in excess in the first place. My hypothesis was, well, I'm going to do a carnivore diet, but not before I decide to just at least do a whole foods only, Whole30 style, for 30 days and document how do I feel on it, and then also compare it to how would I feel when I do 30 days afterwards on a carnivore diet experiment. And what was my thought process? I said, well, First off, I did a scientific process to do it. I did my blood work, I did my DEXA scans, I did my metabolic assessments, performance assessments. I tracked everything with my Whoop every single day, my sleep, everything. And I went on a whole foods diet, very compliant. I tracked my calories and I kept my protein around the same. Everything was controlled. I just finished that portion. And I think last week. I'm currently in what we call an ad libitum period where I'm not tracking anything because I really want to mimic real world scenarios. I want to really understand what does it look as far as my hunger levels and, how I'm managing my weight and things like that when I'm not tracking any calories. I'm going to do that for 2 weeks. Then comes what we call a washout period, which I'm going to go back to eating the way I was before, which is really not that different than what I was really currently doing. And then I want to go in 30 days, carnivore strict diet until, I finish my tracking, but I'm going to keep my protein and my calories exactly the same as whole foods and comparing what happens between the two. And I'm already seeing some of the changes and some of the improvements that I have gotten to, which we can talk about on whole foods only, just by doing that, because I removed gluten, I removed dairy. It's Whole30. It's gluten, dairy. I removed a lot of legumes, not a whole lot of beans, almost none. And also I removed sugar altogether, except for maybe a little piece of dark chocolate here and there, and then maybe some dates and stuff. But for the most part, everything wholesome, whole foods. And super high compliance, even while traveling, everything else. So yeah, and it's been really interesting, and I'm really looking forward to see what happens as when I complete the carnivore section of this. I can kind of compare the two. I have some probably predictions as far as something, but there's some predictions that I had with this that I was not really expecting as far as test results, and which was actually very interesting as well. But that's sort of the gist of the experiment.
It's kind of you're programming your nutrition for different cycles to compare. That's awesome. What before you went on the Whole30? What was your normal diet kind of?
Yeah.
Did you eat a lot of gluten? Did you do some dairy?
It did have all of it. It was balanced, I would say. Going whole foods made me realize that I was really depending on a lot of things out of convenience. So I was doing a lot of protein products, protein powders, protein bars, protein drinks, just so I could get enough protein throughout my day. I was definitely doing, the full gamut of gluten, dairy. I would have, a sandwich every so often. I will do regular pasta at least once or twice a week. Not eating as many fruits and vegetables as I thought I was, eating. I was always kind of prioritizing, let me just kind of have a Yasa bar, which is one of those little yogurt ice cream bars, instead of grabbing up an apple. And then throughout the Whole30, because I was focused on making sure I was compliant, it got me to really start to think about some of this stuff, not conveniently. One thing that a lot of times many of my clients tell me they struggle with is getting enough protein without having to rely on things like protein powders and protein bars and things like that. Well, I proved that you can, because my average protein intake was closer to 175 to 180. I'm 173 pounds. I lost weight. We can talk about that. I was pushing a good amount of protein without having to rely on any type of protein supplement. So it is possible. And that's another part of it too that I think changed. But then I thought my diet was really, really good, when in reality, when I went Whole30, I was like, wow, I definitely was. There's a lot of areas that were missing, which is a big point that I drive across with many people, is the lack of awareness of what your diet really is until something changes in it and you realize it was really either not as good as you thought or not as consistent as you thought. And this is where people get a little lost, is the fact that they lack the awareness on really what's going on in their diets, because when you think about it, there's so many different things to control. There's so many different variables. We eat throughout the day, right? And I can guarantee also, just like it probably happened to me, that there's a lot more calories that you're consuming completely unconsciously, that not you're unconscious, it's just simply mindlessly. You're not really paying attention to it. So going through this experiment, at least this first section of it, allowed me to get massively aware of what was happening and what I was doing and what I was not doing. It was very impactful to look at a lot of those things.
To get that protein, were you just loading up, I assume 3 or 4 meals a day, were you just loading up more protein and then just crushing fruits and vegetables?
Yeah, so again, 2,000 calories, about 180, 175 grams of protein. To kind of keep my calories at bay, I focus a lot on lean proteins, but at the same time, I would push and do things, for example, I'll throw in a tablespoon of chia seeds, which is more of a plant-based protein that would actually add 5 grams. Then I would do eggs, but also I would throw in a lot of egg whites into the mix, just so I can kind of boost the amount of protein into certain things. I always tell my clients to try to standardize your meat portions. It's a little bit easier, more consistent for people. I said, well, if I normally eat 6 ounces of protein or meat in most of my meals, lunch and dinner, I probably need to go to 8 to 9 to make up for the lack of protein I was not getting from things like supplements and all the things that. And that's what I did. And it wasn't really that difficult. I just needed to plan better. And with that, I was able to hit my goals for the most part. If I didn't plan, I think that's a big thing with people when they're really relying more on convenient stuff, this is something also one of my mentors told me. People don't plan to fail, they fail to plan. When you don't have a good plan for it, you're most likely going to kind of falter. If I didn't really plan what I was going to have for lunch, or if I was out and about or something was happening, if I skipped breakfast or my breakfast was protein low, I was going to struggle the rest of the day. But it came down to just me trying to lay out a really good foundation and having an idea of what my days needed to look like. And with that, I was able to just be honestly very compliant in the process. And when you look at my tracker, on average, it's exactly what it needs to be. It was possible. It just really requires, consistency and planning for it.
Did you feel you were eating more than before or less? Because sometimes I get people, when I tell them, hey, we're going to do this, but we're going to increase your protein. They'll come back after a couple of days and be like, it feels like I'm eating a lot more. When in reality, they kind of are. To get that 2,000 calories of fruits, vegetables, and protein, you're going to get a sense of, hey, you got to eat a little bit more per meal. But I find it doesn't make people feel bad. They're just, I can eat this and not feel I got to eat this, and then I'll feel hungry later and then want a snack.
Yeah. There's a concept I teach, which is calorie density versus volume. And that explains that concept beautifully, which is, you can grab 100 calories worth of broccoli or 100 calories worth of watermelon, and you grab 100 calories worth of, I don't know, pizza, right? 100 calories worth of pizza, it's, a quarter of a slice. It's sad. You have that, and then you think you can just have the 100 calories of the slice of pizza and just be done. No, I want to have the full slice. Got it. That turns into 400 calories for you to be able to feel sort of, okay, I had something. Now, when you have 100 calories of broccoli, that's a pretty fair amount. It looks a pretty big bowl. The same thing with watermelon. I was crushing some watermelon yesterday. I was like, man, I just had a big bowl. This was 120 calories. The concept is, again, volume versus calorie density. When you have a food that has a higher calorie dense value or a higher calorie density value, that means that you pack a ton of calories into a small space. When you think about your stomach is a bag. It doesn't really count how many calories you're putting it in. It's just essentially sensing how much you're stuffing it with stuff with. It's, again, literally quite a bag. And then the distension of that bag creates and senses really how much volume is in it, and it sends signals to the brain to release hunger hormones or to stop releasing them and to increase the production of satiety hormones, so ghrelin and leptin. When we focus on more volume in our food, this is why it feels we're eating a lot more, when in reality, we're still eating around the same, maybe even less calories than we used to. It just feels differently. There is a Business Insider back in the day published this really cool article online where they basically compare what 2,000 calories look from different places and restaurants and different things like that. And they put images of McDonald's and Wendy's and all these different things. And you look at these, and you would look at the 2,000 calories and you look at the image and be like, I could crush that in just one meal easily. It was a burger and fries and a large Coke and a McFlurry. Easy. And then they also put what 2,000 calories of variety balanced meals look, and they even added a glass of wine. And it was very impactful to be able to see the differences between that, because 2,000 calories could look way different depending on what you're really putting on your plate. When your clients or mine or people start to notice, well, I'm eating much food, I feel stuffed, it's mostly because you're adding much volume. And this is what happened with this diet experiment, because I was eating less calories than what I'm used to. My typical calorie intake is 2,400 calories on a regular basis.
Everyone has been hearing about the benefits of creatine nowadays. And if you haven't heard about this supplement, then you need to get up to speed. Creatine can improve athletic performance, strength, endurance, help with high intensity exercise, helps aid in recovery, helps strengthen the cognition, the neuronal network, the mind, and increases mitochondrial health. With many people getting on the creatine path now, there's an easy way to get it in. Chewable creatine, simple, easy, and fast. No mixing it, just grab and go. Now you can get Swoley creatine gummies. Grab your daily dose and get all the benefits. Go to getswoley.com and get on the creatine game. At checkout, use the code TFL for 20% off your creatine order.
I was eating now 2,000 calories. I was expecting hunger is going to go up. It did sometimes, but I was managing much better because of the fact that my fiber intake went up. I was feeling stuffed and satisfied a lot of the time. And even what's interesting about this entire 30 days, my cravings for sugar started to go down, even when I cut out sugar altogether, except for the things that the only sugar that came into my diet were some dates, which have a low glycemic index, some dark chocolate, and the sugar from the fruit. I even eliminated artificial sweeteners or non-nutritive sweeteners, everything. And my cravings, because I started logging, I had a daily sheet that I would fill out, started to decrease. I had some, but not as many as I was expecting, because I was definitely relying on a lot more sugar stuff on a daily basis. So that was interesting too. And it really allowed me to understand, well, I could have 2,000 calories, less than what I used to, which probably led to some of that weight loss that I experienced, and still feel satisfied, which is one of the biggest. I mean, when you think about GLP-1 medications, Ozempic and all, what's the one mechanism they try to help people fix is hunger. It shuts down hunger. They don't really want to eat. They don't really think about food. They eat 4, 5, 6, 700 calories a day. That's why it's effective until you stop it. So
exactly,
I think this is just a natural way to do it.
You got the whole 30 side of it. Coming up onto the carnivore side of it, what's your plan of action? Because we'll definitely have to get you on once you finish the whole thing. But plan of action for it. What's that gonna look? Are you gonna go straight, steaks every day? Because there's a lot of different. You look at the carnivore world, and some people, you just eat 3, 4, 5 big steaks a day. I've talked to people like that. And then some people, it's a little bit different. But where's your kind of plan going for?
I'm going to try to do it as quote unquote balanced as I can when I think about all the nutrients that I would not be getting from fruits and vegetables, which I think is one of the biggest kind of concerns I have. I get almost 0 to no fiber. There are specific vitamins that, I may not get in higher amounts. But the proponents of carnivore said that they always say, depending on the type of meats and the type of consumption of certain things you have from animal products, you'll get the combination of everything. So carnivore essentially is going to be composed of all meats, and it's animals and their byproducts. You think about fish, chicken, or a fish, poultry, and beef and pork. Those are going to be 4 big drivers. Anything that comes from chicken, your eggs, that's going to be a big part of it. And the things that come from cows, cheese, butter, and some dairy. I don't think I'm going to be doing heavy dairy. I think I'm just simply going to do some cheese and obviously lots of butter. Because the thing about what's going to be challenging about going on a strict carnivore diet, it's not so much, well, yes, it's adhering to that. But more than that, it's trying to keep your protein at 180 to be able to be comparable to what I did on Whole Foods. Because I'm going to be eating much meat. Because most of my diet is composed of protein sources. Everything I'm eating is essentially a protein source. The way I'm going to have to do this is first I'm going to have to pick very high-fat meats. That's where I'm going to do this time around. I was doing eggs and egg whites. I'm going to have to go full eggs, bacon, things like that, just to kind of drive up the amount of fat in every single meal so that I keep protein at bay to be able to do that. Now, we'll see how it looks, but perhaps I may just have to do 2 big meals on a daily basis. Perhaps I'm just going to have to do just maybe 3 if I can make it work that way. But then the plan is to also incorporate different types of meats that we don't necessarily eat as often, but potentially that we should. For example, It's a great source of a lot of nutrients, and we rarely consume it. I'm probably gonna have a one serving of liver a week. Am I a big fan of it? Absolutely not. Do I know how to cook it? Absolutely not. Am I gonna eat it raw? Absolutely not. I'm somehow just gonna have to throw it in
Yeah.
there because I think that's a good way to be able to get a little bit of extra nutrients from, cow's liver. I'm going to add some of that stuff. I'm going to change it up a little bit with meats. I'm going to be working with a company called Force of Nature. They do, really good practices around agriculture, and they're going to be sending a lot of stuff from bison and all different kinds of meats that I'm not used to consuming, just so I can kind of keep a variety in terms of the process. I anticipate it's going to be extremely hard because I have gone on a ketogenic diet before. I understand what that looks, and I understand also how I feel. I can also predict I'm going to feel way different because I know exactly what it feels when you enter into a ketogenic state, which is essentially, for people that don't know what that is, it's when you push your carbs low enough that your body needs to find an alternative fuel source to be able to power your brain, because your brain relies mainly on glucose. But when it's actually deprived of glucose, you need to start to produce something called ketone bodies to be able to maintain your living. This is why people can survive 20 plus days without food, but they cannot do it without water. It's mostly because your body switches its energy systems to go into more a mode that would allow you to just rely on your own reserves, which is again your fat storage, to be able to provide extra calories. That's what's going to happen after a week. Most likely the first week is going to be terrible. I'm expecting constipation because there's absolutely zero fiber added into that. I'm expecting also very low energy and poor performance. But I expect a switch at some point where my body's going to start to feel better. This is the moment in which people typically tend to have this massive praise for a carnivore. It's because how it makes you feel. The clarity, the constant energy. You feel you're sleeping 6 hours and you're waking up ready to go. I understand the benefits of that. I've experienced those myself, and they feel great. The problem in a carnivore diet, even ketogenic diet, is just the sustainability of it. And the fact that you cannot just simply switch it on and off anytime you want, right? As, I just want to be keto today. And that's not really something that's a sustainable way to do it. And this is why, for example, for me, I gained 20 pounds doing a ketogenic diet back in 2017 because I was just eating fat galore, dude. Eating straight up fats. This is a time where keto was starting to become mainstream and a bunch of products started to come out. This is keto friendly, all that kind of stuff that I'm crushing keto cookies and all that, and without realizing I was probably consuming 4,000 calories worth of fat. That's definitely not gonna get me any leaner. Those are things that I expect may happen throughout that process.
What are you looking at from a blood standpoint? Because yourself, I've gone back and forth on different nutrition strategies. From the beginning to the Whole30, did your blood work change? Did you see certain measures of things drop and certain increase?
Yeah, it's funny because I was actually pulling it up on my computer. I can see some of the stuff. I was very surprised, man, because I was expecting improvements, but I would kind of call it neutral changes.
Okay.
And I'll walk you, there are some things that I'm still waiting on, but some things actually decreased that I didn't really want it to decrease. I did a full gamut of blood work. Mostly I wanted to look at hormone panels, looking at my testosterone and things like that, my production of testosterone, looking at something called FSH and LH, and also looking at nutritional profiles, my blood sugar, my vitamin B12, folate, iron levels, vitamin D, cholesterol, some of the things that are sometimes, normal for people to do and sometimes they're not, and also my kidney function. So what did I find? First off, I think I have something known as familial hypercholesterolemia, which is a predisposition to have high cholesterol levels. I think it runs in my family. From the get-go, my cholesterol levels were higher, and the same thing with my LDL, which was about 150, and it should be under 100. For cholesterol, it should be under 200. Mine was 225 at the beginning. After, I was expecting those numbers to change, but they didn't. My cholesterol, in fact, went from 225 to 231, small change, 2.3% increase, not really significant. And my LDL still stayed around the same, 150 to 152. That's something I was not expecting, considering the fact that, I definitely cut out a lot of saturated fats. I definitely cut out a lot of processed foods. That was kind of interesting to see. Then when we look into my blood sugar remain exactly the same, which is interesting. I was maybe seeing my blood sugar may drop a little bit. I did actually test it. My fasting blood sugar that morning was lower than the fasted blood sugar before. Most likely it could be related to the fact that I was in a lower calorie state. That's something that was kind of interesting as well. And then I have not gotten my labs back on my testosterone levels. I'm interested to see because I had a pretty healthy levels at the time that I did it. Now, because I was in a calorie deficit, I would expect those numbers to maybe slightly go down. Once we get those back, I'll see. But I don't see that actually remaining or staying up, or either the same or may have dropped a little bit when kind of I think about it. Now, triglycerides did go down, and which is actually making sense because I was consuming a lot less fat. And usually triglycerides is a representation of, kind of blood lipids in the blood to a certain extent. Those numbers actually started to go down a little bit. Something else I'm looking at is inflammatory markers, specifically C-reactive protein. And what's kind of interesting through this process, it still remained low, but it went up in the magnitude, my inflammatory markers, which is actually, I was expecting something to be the opposite. Now, when I mean about numbers these numbers are reported on a 0 to 10 milligram per liter scale. My first numbers were less than 1, and the secondary numbers were less than 3. That's the way they're reported. I don't really know what that means. I don't know if it's, anywhere between 1 and 3, and that's something that I'm actually going to meet up with a doctor on Wednesday to be able to discuss some of these results, and he can kind of give me his feedback. But overall labs, I'm going to call it just overall neutral, no a whole lot of changes, either because of the fact that my diet was not really that bad to start off with, but at the same time, 30 days was not enough to drive anything off significantly when I think and look at those numbers overall.
That's that's interesting because I've done that, and for 30 days I didn't find much, but when I did it with my doctor, it was more let's try 3 months, and I saw some changes. But I'm curious, especially when you go onto the carnivore, the LDL, because this one always becomes a topic between people and my doctor and I, because I have the very same thing. I have high cholesterol, but my LDL was up. But before I switched my dietary kind of plan or strategy, I was more high protein, high fat, moderate carbs. But you get to that lipid hypothesis, and I don't think a lot of people understand what that is. But it's kind of interesting to think if you're not keto, but you might be taking in more fats and have your lipids are going up to carry more substrates to the body. But then I flipped it and I changed a couple things in my diet, and I was mainly eating a lot of nut butter because you said earlier, athletes who put a muscle on, I was crushing that stuff, took that stuff out, put some more veggies. I swapped that out for oatmeal and fruit bowl. And 3 months, my LDLs dropped down, and she was like, what'd you do? Because she told me to take out red meat, and I'm going to try something different. It's just interesting. I'll be very interested when you go on the carnivore diet, what happens? Because I'm thinking, okay, if you're eating a lot of, let's just say meat and higher fat foods, the LDLs might go up, but it could go down depending on what your body does.
Yeah, and I think this is where I'm kind of neutral when it comes down to looking at cholesterol values and normal markers, because I feel that those numbers need to be broader range, to be honest, because people freak out about 225 and my cholesterol is higher, and there's people that are put on meds, with borderline levels, which I think it's crazy. So I think there needs to be I think those numbers need to probably be revisited at some point. But the way I think about it too, it's not just looking at cholesterol, LDL, VLDL, and HDL. It's also looking at something called particle size, which the way that they explain it to me, some researchers around this, which I think it was a great analogy, is LDL, which stands for lipoprotein, low density lipoprotein. They have different particle sizes that are encompassed within that specific, group or that bucket. There's the big fluffy particles, and there's going to be the really small ones. And when you start to think about the differences between those, there's some that are going to be more atherogenic, which means are the ones that are going to get deposited under, specific parts of and build plaque, which is, again, what causes blockages and heart conditions, which are the ones that are scary. Those are the small particles. And then the big fluffy ones are usually the ones that are going to be not causing that. And the way they explain it is you think about your blood vessels as this massive river. If you have big fluffy particles, we want you to think about having big cruise ships going through that. There's only one at a time that's going to go through. There's no really blockages. Now, when you think about the small particles, it's this massive traffic jam of a massive amount of speedboats going through, and the likelihood of kind of running into a jam and starting to kind of pile up and accumulate is going to be much higher. The thing with a lot of blood work and blood testing, they don't necessarily look at the differences between that. It's a more of a costly test, and at the same time, it's just not routine for people to get that done. I think I may do it. I didn't do it this time, but because I'm gonna go retest blood work, and I think it's in potentially 2 weeks or 3 weeks before I go carnivore again. We can kind of have a baseline and then testing again afterwards. And I'm interested to see if I can get some particle size analysis done. I can look at, the differences between them. And that's something else too, why I feel cholesterol and lipid profiles are just not, they're just a lot more than just what those numbers. My mom reached out to me, freaked out about the same, and I'm like, hey, my cholesterol is higher and all that kind of stuff. Now, granted, there are certain things you can do to start to, mobilize and improve that. One thing about my experiment is I removed all kinds of supplements. One supplement that has been known to reduce LDL and cholesterol levels is omega-3s. I removed that out of my diet because I wanted to make sure that I had some really good data on this. My only source of omega-3s were plant-based chia seeds, flax seeds, and then at the same time salmon. Or, those are some eggs have a little bit of omega-3, but probably my omega-3 intake probably went low because I was having salmon once a week. That's why maybe there's certain things in there that I could have affected or maybe not improved those numbers comparatively to what I was doing prior to or before.
It is always fascinating when you start to move things in and out or change plans or strategies. You take one thing out and you can see certain levels of other things change, and that's how the human body is. But I do, that's why I wanted to ask about the cholesterol, because I think a lot of people do panic when they initially get their blood work. There's a lot more layers to it, and it's good that we're kind of bringing that about now with more research and more blood work testing. But you did mention at the beginning, when you talk about people's strategy, you talk about biggest mistakes you've seen. What are the biggest dietary and nutrition mistakes that you see in your practice with people, and how to fix them? Because I think a lot of people, they might not know their mistakes. Now we're going to tell them, and here's what to do about it.
Number one is a lack of awareness. And we talked about this earlier. I think many people are just too lost in thinking that they're doing their things and they're clueless as to why something is not working. And the way I explained what's happening is the same thing that I just explained with my experiment. So I'll talk quickly about my body composition results because it's going to drive this point across beautifully. I lost 8 pounds in 30 days just by doing what I did. People have seen it in my face. Now, interestingly, though, my DEXA scan didn't show that, but it actually showed that I lost muscle. But that's going to be a different topic of conversation because you can look at my body and you can tell I look leaner. My face looks different. People have told me I look different as far as, whether it's inflammation or something, but definitely I feel and look leaner. Not a ton, but then I do. But I was trying to get leaner prior to. And whatever I was doing, I was not working. Why? Because I was not self-aware of many little small things that I was doing that was probably affecting me one way or another. I was probably eating that little yassa bar, and sometimes it turned into 2. And perhaps I was just sitting in this chair all day long, and I was not really moving in my body as much, except for my 1-hour workout that I'll get done, right? And we don't necessarily pay attention to many things that we're doing, and when we're unaware, we start to get desperate and we start to do crazy things, which leads people to go into fad diets and things like that because they work beautifully very quickly, but they won't last because people don't necessarily have a process to be able to maintain this long term. Mistake number one is lack of awareness or not having a system to create awareness. I like to use the analogy around banks and bank statements and finances. If you don't ever look at your bank account and you're really trying to budget things out for specific needs, something you want to buy or just to have a budget, you won't ever understand if you're on track to reaching your goals if you don't ever open up your statements and your bank accounts and understand exactly what goes in and out, right? That's how I lived my life entirely through college and then wonder why I was actually broke all the time. because I never looked at that stuff. The same thing applies to this. Well, you don't ever look and take a hard look at what you're doing, then how can you expect it to do that? So that's mistake number one. Mistake number two is, I have to explain this. I love to use analogies if you haven't really caught on that yet. But the second thing is people are focusing on filling their cups up with sand instead of focusing on the big rocks. Let me explain this. People understand it better. If you grab a bucket, or let's say a jar, and you're supposed to fill it up with three things: pebbles, big rocks, and sand. If you start adding sand first, do you have space for the pebbles and the rocks? No. You packed it all up. If you start to add pebbles first, and then you add the sand, do you have space for the big rocks?
Nope.
No. If you start to add the big rocks first, and then you add the pebbles that kind of squeeze in through the holes into that, and then you add the sand, because it's thin and small, can you fit into three things, or at least can fit in three things within that jar? Yes, you can. That's exactly what it looks when people try to focus on things in nutrition or health or fitness that they shouldn't really be starting to focus on too much. I'll give you an example. Seed oils. Seed oils, it's sand. That's something that, whether you believe or not, is harmful to your health, because whatever research, which, spoiler alert, I don't think that's something people need to be worried about. But if you think about that, and then you go desperately trying to fix and remove seed oils from your diet, maybe you get a net positive, but ultimately you're focusing on none of the things, but then you're consuming alcohol and you're not moving your body enough. You're not focusing on the big levers. What are the big levers? These are 5 rocks that I usually tell people as we go through the second mistake. These are the 5 rocks, or I call it the core 5, that people should really be focusing on, that if this is the only thing you do every single day, which is, by the way, another spoiler alert, it's stupid boring, right? Because you probably have heard these things already, but yet nobody's actually doing them consistently. You're probably either going to lose weight, accomplish your goals, feel better, or all of the above. So these are 5 things that when I look back in my 12 years working as a dietitian, and I look at my clients who've sustained the goals and the results, and I ask them, how'd you do it? They all come down with 1 or 2 or 3 out of these 5 things, which are simple. You know them. First is get protein, regardless of the diet that you do. Every diet prioritizes that. It's my favorite macronutrient. Get enough protein. Prioritize it. Think about protein in every one of your meals. Is there a protein source here? Yes, no. Okay, no. How can I get it? That's number 1. Get water, which is that's such a super underrated strategy for weight loss, health, performance that people are not necessarily doing a great job in, which is drinking enough fluids, drinking enough water. That's a second. Get fiber through fruits and vegetable consumption. This goes against the carnivore experiment that I'm doing. But ultimately, this is what drives satiety. It helps you drive up a lot more micronutrient intake, which is vitamins and minerals, and overall makes you feel better. That's number 3. And number 4 is going to be get movement, which means just move your body. Do not be sedentary. That doesn't have to be an hour-long workout where you're drenched in sweat at the end. It could just simply be a 15 to 20-minute walk. We just simply go from couch potato to at least getting our move on a little bit on a daily basis, and get enough food, which I usually translate into stop skipping meals. Because we live in such a very high, fast-paced, at least here in the United States, society, that food is the last thing in our minds. And this is where we kind of choose convenience out of, this is something that I learned a lot throughout this whole 30 experiment, which was, I got into a point where I really wanted food to taste good. I was looking at recipes and trying different things. I don't remember the last time I did that, because I'm just in go-go mode and thinking I just need to get the quickest thing possible. Food becomes sort of something that we got to do to stay alive type of situation, or to make us feel good. That's another part of it too. And then what happens when people skip meals is your body's going to, ask you to pay the bill. This is what ends up translating into most, I work with a lot of men, dads, either mom stuff. 8 o'clock rolls around, kids are in bed. You're finally able to breathe after a long day. And this is what you realize, that you have eaten one adequate meal an entire day. Guess what you do? You go and crush every single thing that gets in front of you, the fridge and the pantry, and you eat uncontrollably because of the fact that your body needs something, but you're just too tired to really make a good meal at that point. Cognitively, you don't make the best decisions. Physiologically, your body's starved. That's another big part of it that happens. Fix these 5 things, those are big 5 rocks, and you're going to be able to now then focus on, here's a pebble, tracking your macros and tracking your calories. Here's another pebble, working on a specific structured training program. Those are things that are going to be able to allow you to do that. And then you can do the sand, a diet that you really want to experiment with, or removing, going organic if you want to, which I think is stupid. And, doing just more specific, advanced things that you want to start to try out and test out, not the other way around. That's a huge mistake, again, tied up with 5 key strategies to help people. And the last strategy that I think, or the last mistake that I think a lot of times people make, it's seeing healthy or good nutrition or good health as a black or white process. I call it all or nothing. If I'm not having the best diet, I might as well just not have any diet at all. If I don't work out 7 days a week, 6 days a week, then I might as well just not work out at all. There's no in between. It's difficult for people to understand that even something is better than nothing. They feel they're waiting for the best moment to start their fitness journey or routine. They need to have the perfect, all the stars and planets need to be aligned so they can start to fix their diet. It's like, oh yeah, I'm just, how many times I've jumped on calls with people, oh, I really want to do this, but I'm going on vacation next week, but I have this trip coming up, but I have my kid's graduation. You're waiting for a perfect moment that never arrives. And mostly because you have this mindset that you feel like you have to do all at once and check all the boxes, because if you don't check all the boxes, you're going to fail. Well, you have stayed stuck for months and years by having that mentality versus the person that said, you know what, maybe this week I'm going to go on 1 long walk. And then next week I'm going to go on 2. And have you ever heard of there's a book, I mean, sure you've heard about it if you're a coach, the Anatomy of the Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. Yeah, everybody has. This is the way he explains it, the power of tiny wins, which says that, you can get 38 times better at something that you focus on getting 1% better every day. At the end of the year, if you simply focus on that, what is 1% in every day? 1% better every day could be just simply choosing a high protein breakfast today. It could be doing this or that. And again, this applies to people that are just lost and they're starting somewhere. They just feel they're not really kind of getting into anywhere. Focus on those 5 core pillars. Make that your top priority. And then you can start to focus on other things. What's the big problem? That's just not sexy enough. This is why I said they're stupid, simple things, because most people know that they need to do those 5 things. But nobody's actually doing them consistently because they want something fancy. They want something they can talk about. They want something that they can, they want something that is quick and fast. This is why all these GLP-1 people, it's, they're great, but then there's a new study that came out. They follow along, the amount of weight, 20% weight loss drop over the course of not sure how much time.
It's crazy.
But then when they look at the ones that stopped doing it, none of them maintain the weight off.
Well, that's the thing. When people are going to come off of that, what are, all of a sudden, all those signals are going to come back to your brain. I'm hungry. I'm this. I'm that. The body's going to react different to it. It's going to be very interesting because we'll probably I would assume we're going to start seeing that within the next year or two when people initially go on and then they think they're good, they're going to come off. And it's just going to be any other.
Yeah, but they don't want to come off. Or I guess they don't. They're
not going to want to.
They're not going to want to. Or they're going to be told, well, if you want to, it's people that have type 2 diabetes. It's, well, you just have to be a metformin, for the rest of your life to be able to kind of get a handle on this. No, you can handle, the type 2 diabetic can handle their blood sugar if they have the proper diet, the proper lifestyle. But then a pill sounds easier, right?
Way easier.
So way easier. And that's the thing with it.
Yeah, and that's why people go to the social medias and they find. You mentioned seed oils and stuff. They find these little things that they'll hold on to. And it's like, well, you're doing the small sand stuff, but you haven't even fixed the big stuff. And a lot of it's just changing one habit at a time. Because it can be overwhelming to go, oh, I'm going to do this all at once. Some people can do it, right? And those people that can do it, you're going to work with them and you're, okay, we can do it. But most people I find, they're not you and I where we can just be, hey, tomorrow, I'm going to go Whole30. Simple. They need to start steps at a time. And I would just question, you did mention about the organic, and I want to circle back because that was an interesting thing. What's your kind of thought about that? I know you kind of.
Yeah, it's It's something companies pay money to be able to add into their packaging. They can sell it for a higher price point. That's really, it's all marketing. It really comes down to that. I don't packaging looks prettier, makes you feel kind of safer. People talk about the dirty dozen, bunch of different things that the nutritional value of organic versus non-organic, it's almost zero to none difference. It's not like you're getting better nutrients by buying something that is organic. Most people usually choose that because, well, something organic has, it's free of pesticides. No, it's not free of pesticides. They're just using organic pesticides, which, by the way, these are pesticides that I've just the pesticide company have paid money to be able to call something that is organic. It's a kind of the same cycle. It's completely worthless. Again, if it's just something that helps you sleep better at night and you want to actually spend the extra cash on it, by all means. In fact, I'll be the first one to say that sometimes there's certain things that I feel I just kind of I'm driven to just buy organic because I feel the packaging looks better. To be honest, that looks kind of cleaner. That looks probably better. And the reality is that it's most likely no different than anything else. Especially when you're thinking about now Whole Foods. You think I was buying all organic tomatoes and all that? Hell no. I wasn't doing it. If it was on sale, I was, because sometimes Trader Joe's would kind of throw in something organic a little bit cheaper than the conventional ones. Sure, I'll get the organic one. But it wasn't really for any type of superior benefits that I would get on buying something, conventional compared to organic. I don't think people need to really focus on that, again, unless you prefer to just simply spend a little bit more extra money on that.
Great explanation. So that's why I wanted to ask it. Well, I know we're coming up on an hour here, and I respect time. Where can people find you online? What's your website, Instagram?
Yeah. The best place is, first off, if at the time of this recording, not sure when it's out, but it most likely may be at the time that either I finish or I'm kind of going through this experiment. I post updates on it every day on my Instagram page at Andres Ayesta, all together. I'm sure it'll be linked up in the show notes.
Yep.
And that's the best way to kind of, connect with me. You can also find me doing some, fun stuff on TikTok at Andres the Dietitian. Now, if you want us to just binge more, Netflix binge, watch some of my stuff, YouTube is the best place to find me. And you can just simply type in my name and you're going to be able to find not only my entire experiment breakdown, but updates on it and a bunch of other really helpful information. If you found this valuable, you're probably going to whatever, it's already on there too. My website is planosnutrition.com, and that's a place where you can find out more about how you can work with us, learn from us, or even just get a couple of different freebies or free value from some of the stuff that we have available in there.
Awesome. Go check those websites, YouTube, Instagram out, get some information. And if you do have more, you can always reach out to him via his website. Well, we appreciate you coming on today. Great conversation.
Matt Gluckman and Eric Menchie here from Think Fitness Life. Our entire careers have been dedicated to fitness, particularly how the mind helps the body. We've been around gyms and nutrition strategies for 25 plus years collectively, and nothing harms or helps better than your own mind, untrained or trained. Pushing beyond your limits, overcoming whatever's thrown your way, and making the decision to show up day in and day out as a lifestyle takes more soul than sand. And what I mean by that is when you can get your mindset and heart leading you consistently in the direction of your goals and dreams, well, it's just a matter of time before you have the performance, physique, or quality of life you're yearning for. See, your thoughts will stem from your beliefs, which will then lead you to action, which develop into your behavior and ultimately lead you to results. It's really that simple. Our process takes time and it takes open communication. It's amazing what pops up along the fitness journey to betterment, and we can be there every step of the way. To learn more or apply for coaching, visit www.thinkfitnesslife.com. Start recreating your life today.